The sword hadn't been touched in 5 centuries, for good reason. Derek Mercer ignored every warning, every legend, every bone-chilling tale of the Sleeping Queen's wrath. His fingers closed around the obsidian hilt, and for one glorious second he thought he'd gotten away with the greatest theft in history. Then the blade screamed. Black veins crawled up his arm like living poison. The ground trembled, and from the shattered throne behind him came a whisper that froze his blood. Thief. The queen was awake, and she wanted her sword back. Too bad it had chosen him instead. Please wait. Before we start, tap that iCard button in the top right corner and smash that subscribe button. Right now. Hit the notification bell so you're first in line when new stories land. Alright, let's dive into the story. Chapter 1. The ruins of Valterra Keep stood silent under the pale moonlight, its broken towers clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. Derek Mercer moved through the shadows with practiced ease, his boots crunching lightly on ancient gravel. Behind him, Leora Vasquez adjusted the plasma torch on her wrist, its blue glow casting sharp angles across her face. "You sure this is the place?" she whispered, eyeing the crumbling throne room ahead. Derek flashed her a grin, his teeth white against the darkness. "Positive. According to the legends, the Sleeping Queen's sword is right where she left it, stuck in her throne for 500 years. Leora rolled her eyes. "Legends also say anyone who touches it gets their soul ripped out." "Yeah, well, legends are written by losers who failed." Derek stepped over a fallen column, his breath fogging in the chill air. "Besides, you think a little cursed sword scares me?" Leora smirked. "I think your ego's bigger than your survival instinct." The throne room was worse for wear. Half the ceiling had caved in, and the walls were scarred with ancient burns. But at the center of it all, untouched by time, stood the obsidian throne, and embedded in its back, as if plunged there in a single, furious strike, was the sword. Derek let out a low whistle. Now that's a blade. The weapon was sleek, its black metal drinking in the moonlight rather than reflecting it. The edge looked sharp enough to split atoms, and the hilt was wrapped in dark leather, still pristine despite centuries of neglect. Leora's fingers twitched toward her sidearm. "Derek, I got a bad feeling about this." He was already moving forward. "Relax. It's just a sword. It's never just a sword." Derek ignored her, stepping up to the throne. He hesitated for just a second, long enough for Leora to think he might actually listen to reason, before wrapping his fingers around the hilt. The second he pulled, 3 things happened at once. First, the sword screamed, a sound like metal being torn apart at the molecular level. Second, the ground trembled, dust shaking loose from the ceiling in thick clouds. And third, Derek's hand burned, black veins crawling up his arm as the sword's hilt fused to his skin. Leora's plasma torch flared to life, its light cutting through the sudden darkness. "Derek!" He couldn't answer. The pain was too much, the sword's grip on him too tight. And then, silence. The dust settled, the trembling stopped, and a voice, smooth as silk and cold as the void, echoed through the chamber. "Thief!" Behind them, with a sound like cracking bone, the obsidian throne split open. Leora's breath caught. "Oh, you have to be kidding me." Derek finally found his voice, hoarse and strained. "Yeah," he muttered, staring at the sword now permanently attached to his hand. "I think I messed up." Chapter 2. The crack in the obsidian throne widened, spiderwebbing across its surface like black lightning. A gust of frozen air rushed out, carrying the scent of ancient dust and something metallic, like old blood. Derek tried to yank his hand free from the sword, but the blade might as well have been welded to his bones. Leora grabbed his shoulder, her plasma torch casting frantic shadows across the crumbling walls. "We need to go. Now." Before Derek could respond, a pale hand emerged from the darkness of the shattered throne. Long fingers, tipped with nails sharpened to points, curled around the fractured stone. Then another. "Too late for that," Derek muttered. The queen rose slowly, as if unfolding from centuries of slumber. Her armor clung to her like liquid shadow, every curve accentuating both her lethal grace and unnatural beauty. Her hair cascaded down her back like spilled ink, shifting even when the air stood still. But her eyes were the worst part. They burned with a cold, blue-white light, pupils slit like a predator's. Leora's grip on Derek's shoulder tightened. Okay, new plan. You apologize, and we run. The queen's lips curled into a smile that didn't touch those terrifying eyes. An apology? Her voice was a whisper that somehow filled the entire throne room. For theft. Derek swallowed hard but forced a grin. In my defense, it was just lying around. The queen's smile vanished. She moved faster than either of them could track. 1 second she was by the throne, the next she had Leora by the throat, lifting her off the ground like she weighed nothing. Give me my blade, the queen hissed, or watch her die slowly. Leora choked, her boots kicking uselessly in the air as she clawed at the queen's grip. Derek's pulse roared in his ears. He couldn't fight this thing. He wasn't a warrior. But the sword in his hand had other ideas. Before he could think, the blade tugged him forward, its weight suddenly effortless in his grip. The queen's eyes flicked to it, her expression twisting with something like shock. That's impossible, she whispered. The sword hummed, its edge glowing with faint blue runes that hadn't been there moments before. Derek didn't hesitate. He swung. The queen dropped Leora and leaped back just in time, the blade missing her by inches but leaving a trail of shimmering light in its wake. Leora collapsed to the ground, gasping. Since when? She coughed. Can you do that? Derek stared at the sword, his arm trembling. I didn't. It did. The queen's shock morphed into fury. That blade was forged from my hand alone, she snarled. You are unworthy. The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost crawled up the walls, and the queen attacked. Chapter 3. The queen moved like liquid shadow, her form blurring as she launched. Derek barely had time to blink before she was upon him, but the sword reacted faster than he could. It jerked his arm up on its own, the blade meeting the queen's razor-sharp nails with a shower of sparks. The impact rattled Derek's teeth, but he held firm, the sword's unnatural strength flowing through him. Leora scrambled back, drawing her pulse pistol. Duck! Derek dropped just as she fired. The plasma bolt sizzled past his ear, striking the queen square in the chest. She staggered back, her armor smoking, but when the light faded, there wasn't so much as a scratch on her. The queen smirked, brushing imaginary dust from her shoulder. Goo! Derek gaped. Okay, that should have melted her. The sword vibrated in his grip, the runes along its blade pulsing faster. Leora's eyes darted between the weapon and the queen. Derek, I think your new friend is trying to tell you something. Before he could respond, the queen attacked again. This time, the sword didn't just block, it countered, guiding Derek's body into a flawless riposte that forced the queen to leap back. Her eyes narrowed. Impossible, she hissed. That blade knows you. Derek barely had time to process that before the sword yanked him forward into another strike. He moved with precision he'd never possessed, his feet light, his strikes fluid. The queen parried each blow, but for the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across her face. Leora circled behind the queen, her pistol raised. Keep her busy. The queen whirled, but Derek was already moving, the sword pulling him into a sweeping slash that forced her attention back. Steel clashed against whatever dark material her claws were made of, the air between them crackling with energy. You fight well for a thief, the queen sneered, pressing closer. Derek gritted his teeth. Yeah, well, I had a good teacher. The sword flared brighter, as if pleased. Then, without warning, it changed. The black metal shimmered, the blade elongating slightly, the runes shifting into an unfamiliar pattern. The queen's eyes widened. No, she breathed. It's awakening for you. Derek had no idea what that meant, but the sword clearly did. It surged with new power, the hilt growing warmer in his grasp. Leora fired again, this time aiming for the queen's legs. The shot grazed her thigh, and for the first time, she flinched. "Now!" Leora shouted. The sword pulled Derek into a final, devastating strike, a downward arc that should have cleaved the queen in two. But at the last second, she vanished, reappearing 10 feet away near the shattered throne. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her perfect composure finally cracking. "This isn't over, thief," she spat. Then the ground beneath her feet opened, swallowing her whole before Derek or Leora could react. The throne room fell silent. Derek's arm dropped, the sword's glow fading slightly. Leora exhaled sharply. What the hell was that? Derek stared at the blade, his palms still fused to its hilt. "I think," he said slowly, "we just made a very powerful enemy." Chapter 4. The ruins of Altera keep groaned around them as Derek and Leora stumbled through the crumbling corridors. The swords glow their only light in the deepening darkness. The black veins had spread up Derek's arm to his elbow, pulsing in time with the blade's eerie hum. Leora kept glancing back, her pulse pistol still drawn. "She's coming back. You know that, right?" Derek flexed his fingers around the hilt, wincing as the fused flesh pulled taut. "Yeah, well, next time I'll let you grab the cursed artifact." A thunderous crack echoed from above as part of the ceiling collapsed behind them, forcing them to sprint forward. They burst into what remained of the keep's armory, racks of ancient weapons now rusted to dust, their shattered remains littering the floor. Leora kicked aside a decayed helmet. "We need to get that thing off your hand before." The sword jerked in Derek's grip, nearly pulling him off his feet as it pointed toward the far wall. "What now?" Derek grunted, struggling against its pull. Leora's eyes narrowed. "It's trying to show us something." With a sound like tearing fabric, the sword dragged Derek across the room toward a massive war mural etched into the stone. The artwork depicted a horrific battle. A beautiful queen standing triumphant over mountains of corpses, her black sword raised high. But something was wrong with the image. Derek's breath caught. Look at the sword in the mural. The weapon in the queen's hand wasn't black. It shone silver, its blade covered in glowing blue runes identical to those now appearing on Derek's sword. Leora traced the faded inscription beneath the mural. "The betrayer's blade," she read aloud. "Forged to protect, turned to slaughter." The sword vibrated violently in Derek's hand, the runes flashing brighter. Then, without warning, a voice spoke, not aloud, but directly into Derek's mind, ancient and furious. "She was never meant to wield me." Derek staggered, clutching his head as visions flooded his senses. The queen raising the sword against her people, the blade screaming as it was corrupted, the moment she plunged it into the obsidian throne to silence its protests forever. Leora grabbed his shoulders. "Derek, what's happening?" He gasped, the visions fading. "The sword, it's not hers. She stole it, twisted it." A cruel laugh echoed through the chamber as the temperature plummeted. Frost spread across the walls in jagged patterns. "Clever little thieves," purred the queen's voice from the darkness. But knowing changes nothing. She stepped from the shadows, her armor now cracked where Derek's blade had struck her, revealing glimpses of swirling darkness beneath. Her eyes burned brighter, her lips peeled back to reveal needle-like teeth. "The blade may remember," she hissed, "but it will obey." The sword in Derek's hand flared blue-white, so bright it burned. "Never again," the voice in his mind roared. And this time, when the queen attacked, the sword didn't just guide Derek, it took over. Chapter 5. Derek's body moved without his command. The sword surged with power, blue-white energy coursing through his veins as it guided him into a flawless defensive stance. The queen's claws raked toward his throat, only to meet the glowing blade midair with a shower of sparks. Leora dove behind a collapsed pillar, her pulse pistol whining as it charged. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Derek wanted to respond, but the sword had full control. It pivoted his body within human precision, countering the queen's next strike with a slash that forced her back. The blade left trails of light in its wake, the runes burning brighter with each movement. The queen hissed, her cracked armor revealing tendrils of shadow writhing beneath. "You think a tool can defeat me?" The sword's voice roared in Derek's mind. "I am no tool." With a sudden jerk, the weapon dragged Derek into an offensive flurry, strikes so fast they blurred together. The queen barely parried each one, her movements growing frantic as the sword's power intensified. Leora peeked out from cover, her eyes widening. "Derek, your arm." He glanced down. The black veins had receded, replaced by the same glowing blue patterns now covering the sword. Energy thrummed beneath his skin, both terrifying and exhilarating. The queen saw it too. Her sneer faltered. "Impossible. That power belongs to..." The sword didn't let her finish. It yanked Derek forward into a devastating uppercut, the blade grazing the queen's chin. She screamed, not in pain, but in rage, as a single drop of black blood sizzled against the metal. The effect was instantaneous. The sword's glow turned blinding. The runes rearranged themselves into an entirely new pattern, and the voice in Derek's mind became crystal clear. "Now we end this." The queen staggered back, clutching her face where the sword had cut her. For the first time, real fear flashed in those burning eyes. "You don't understand what you're unleashing." Derek tried to resist the sword's pull, but its will was overwhelming. It raised the blade high, the tip aimed straight for the queen's heart. Leora's shout cut through the chaos. "Derek, stop! Look at the mural." The sword hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Derek wrenched his gaze toward the ancient artwork. The details he'd missed before now stood out in stark relief. The silver sword wasn't just different from the queen's weapon. It was the same blade before she corrupted it. And in the mural's background, barely visible among the corpses, lay a figure in armor identical to the queen's. Another queen, fallen. The truth hit Derek like a lightning strike. There were two of them, he breathed. The sword's glow flickered, and in that moment of distraction, the queen struck. Her claws tore through Derek's side before he could react, sending him crashing to the ground. The sword clattered from his grip, its light dimming. The queen loomed over him, her smile triumphant. "Foolish child," she whispered. "Did you really think you were the first to try stealing my power?" Then the ground beneath them opened, and they fell into darkness. Chapter 6. The fall lasted forever and ended too soon. Derek hit the ground hard, his wounded side screaming in protest as he rolled across cold stone. The queen landed gracefully nearby, her claws scraping against the floor as she straightened. They weren't in the keep anymore. The chamber around them was vast and circular, its walls lined with towering statues of armored warriors, all frozen in poses of agony, their stone faces twisted in silent screams. At the center stood an altar, and atop it, Derek's breath caught. Another sword, identical to the one he'd wielded, but pure silver, its blade untouched by corruption. The queen's laughter echoed through the chamber. "You wanted the blade's true thief? Here it lies." Derek forced himself up, clutching his bleeding side. "What is this place?" "The tomb of the first," she sneered, circling the altar, "where my dear sister hid her precious weapon after I took her throne." The pieces clicked together. The mural, the two queens. "You killed her," Derek breathed. The queen's smile turned vicious. "And I'll kill anyone else who tries to wield what's mine." Above them, rubble shifted as Leora's voice rang out. "Derek!" She rappelled down through the hole in the ceiling, pulse pistol drawn. But the queen flicked her wrist, and a wave of darkness sent Leora crashing into the wall. She slumped to the ground, unmoving. Derek's blood ran cold. "Leora!" The queen ignored him, stepping toward the silver sword. 500 years I've searched for this. With both blades united, no power in this world will stop me. Derek's fallen sword suddenly flared to life where it lay nearby, its glow intensifying as if calling to its twin. The voice in his mind returned, weaker now but insistent. "Stop her before she touches it." Derek lunged, not for his sword, but straight for the queen. He tackled her just as her fingers brushed the silver blade's hilt, sending them both sprawling across the altar. She snarled, raking her claws across his back. "You insect!" Pain blinded him, but Derek held on, pinning her wrist away from the sword. "The blade showed me the truth. You're nothing but a murderer." The queen's free hand clamped around his throat. "And you're nothing at all." As black spots danced in his vision, Derek made one last desperate move. He grabbed the silver sword. Light exploded through the chamber. The queen shrieked as the two blades resonated, their combined energy sending shockwaves through the air. Derek gasped as power flooded his body. Not the sword's control this time, but something deeper. Memories not his own. The first queen's last stand. The betrayal. And most importantly, how to end this. The queen scrambled back, her confidence shattered. "No, that power belongs to me." Derek rose, a sword in each hand, their glow merging into a brilliant white light. "Not anymore," he growled. The tomb began to shake. The statues moved. Chapter 7. The stone warriors stepped from their alcoves, their hollow eyes glowing with the same blue light as the swords. The queen backed away, her claws raised, but for the first time, true fear twisted her beautiful features. "They're just statues," she hissed, though her voice trembled. Derek felt the power of both swords flowing through him. The corrupted black blade in his left hand, now purging its darkness, and the pure silver one in his right, blazing like a star. The voices of both weapons spoke as one in his mind. "Finish it." The statues advanced, their ancient weapons humming with energy. The queen lashed out, her claws shattering the first warrior to reach her. But three more took its place. Leora groaned, stirring where she'd fallen. "Derek, what's happening?" He didn't answer. The sword were guiding him now, their combined power lifting him off the ground. Energy crackled around him as he crossed the blades before him, their tips pointing at the queen. She screamed, not in anger, but in terror, as the statues froze in place. "This isn't over," she spat, shadows swirling around her feet. "I'll return." The swords pulsed, and the statues detonated in a blast of blue-white light. The shockwave hit the queen like a physical force, ripping the darkness from her body in writhing tendrils. She collapsed to her knees, her perfect armor now dull and cracked, her once glowing eyes dimming to ordinary brown. Derek landed softly before her, the sword's power still thrumming through his veins. "You were never the true queen," he said, his voice echoing with the weight of centuries. "Just a thief who got lucky." The fallen monarch looked up at him, her lips curling in one last sneer. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, her body crumbled to dust, leaving only an empty suit of armor behind. The chamber fell silent. The sword's glow faded, their connection to Derek severing as both blades clattered to the ground. He dropped to his knees, suddenly exhausted, the wounds on his side and back burning. Leora limped over, her face pale. "Did we just kill a 500-year-old monster queen?" Derek stared at the pile of dust that had been their enemy. "No," he said softly. "We set things right." The silver sword suddenly vibrated, its blade flashing once before going still. The black sword, now cleansed of corruption, lay quiet beside it. Leora eyed them warily. "So what now?" Derek reached out, hesitating just before his fingers touched the silver blade. The voice in his mind spoke one last time, gentler now. "The choice is yours." He looked at Leora, then back at the swords, and smiled. And that was the end of the story. Comment below if you want the next chapter, and hit that like button. Please subscribe, turn on the bell, and, as always, keep the last light burning.